Good morning from Vietnam. Good evening to you from New York City, Dr. Solange. Thanks a lot for spending your evening to join our Insight Sharing program, a program that we dedicated to help people to be motivating through the stories of our speakers. So thanks a lot for joining us. Okay.
My pleasure to be here. Thank you.
And I know that you've yet been to Vietnam, and please accept our invitation. The next time you travel to this part of the world, you have me and my family. We are very excited to take you and your family around town.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. And I might take you up on that offer someday.
Absolutely, absolutely. I'm looking forward to it. And in our culture, Dr. Solange, it's very order for us to have our speaker to introduce about themselves. So is that okay if you can introduce a little bit about who you are and the work that you do?
Sure. My name is Solange Charas. I'm originally from California.
Ah,
My parents were Eastern European. They immigrated to this country. And I'm the only American born of my immediate family. So my parents were immigrants to this country. And when they came to the United States, they came with my older sister, who was born in Brazil, and then they had me. And when they came from Brazil, they brought a young woman with them to help them set up house and take care of the children, who was from Peru. So I did not speak English until I was about 5 years old.
ah,
Born in America, living in America, and I did not speak the language. I learned how to speak the language when my mother sent me to school. So I am like a stranger in a strange land. I was born in America, but I didn't, I wasn't like an American. I was like an immigrant, like my family. And it gives you a different type of insight. It's a different relationship to your environment and to other people. It's less of an entitlement and more of a precious gift.
mm,
Yeah. So I grew up really appreciating America. My parents survived World War II,
mm,
and I grew up really appreciating the freedom and the opportunities that were afforded to me, not because I was entitled to them because I was born here, but because my parents worked so hard to make sure that I had those opportunities.
mm.
So I grew up in California. I had an unbelievable mother who really taught me a lot of life lessons, and really focused on having an impact, making a difference, having my time on this planet actually mean something.
Mm.
So, grew up in California, went to UC Berkeley, got my undergraduate degree. Then I came out east, and I worked for a couple of years before I got my business degree. Came to upstate New York to get my MBA from Cornell University, and I studied accounting and finance,
Mm.
and I took a few tax classes. So enough to really think about that as a minor. My father was an accountant,
Ah.
and so um, he was very orderly, and everything was precise. Exactly. Um, and I like that. I like the predictability of only having one answer to something. I liked math because, not in theoretical math, but in regular math, there's a right answer, there's a wrong answer.
Mm.
Doing crossword puzzles, there's the right answer, there's a wrong answer. So I like the things where the right answer was very absolute,
Mm.
with less interpretation. Um, so I really enjoy the science, maths and science. And in college, I was required to take a writing class, and I realized that I'm not such a bad writer. So I did both. I did, political science and economics, letters and numbers. After my MBA, I worked for many years. So I graduated in 1988, and I didn't go back for my PhD until 2010. So there was a long period of time where I was just a professional. And I went back to school in 2010 because I finally discovered something. I knew after I got my MBA, I knew I was going to get a PhD. And that's really because of my mom, because she always used to say, so I grew up in the 60s. And in the 60s, girls were told to be nurses or to be teachers or to be stewardesses. And my mom used to say to me, if you're already going to be a nurse, be a doctor. If you're going to be a teacher, be a professor. If you're going to be a stewardess, be a pilot. So always strive for the highest you can get in any career. And so after I got my MBA, I knew that I was going to get a PhD, because if I'm already going to be in school, I might as well get the highest degree that I can.
Yeah.
But I needed to find something that I was really passionate about, to understand, to study, where I could make a difference. So I studied the intersection between corporate governance and teams and teamwork. Another influence from my mother, who used to say, 1 does the work of 1, 2 does the work of 3, 3 does the work of 6. So she taught me that when you work in teams, you actually leverage the ability of those teams to produce more better outcomes. And so I was always mindful of working in teams and how teams can actually produce more than any one person can on its own. And in the work that I did as a consultant, I was often able to observe senior level teams, boardroom teams, and C-suite teams. And, after 20 years of consulting just to those types of teams, I got pretty good at figuring out which of those teams were good and which of those teams were bad. And I was curious as to whether or not the performance, the quality of the team at the very top of an organization, in the boardroom and in the executive suite, made a difference. Yeah?
Yep.
So that's what I studied in my PhD. I studied whether or not the quality of the team in the boardroom and the quality of the team in the executive suite and the C-suite actually made a difference to how well companies perform financially. And so that's what I studied for 4 years.
Wow.
And if you're curious to know what the answer is,
What is that?
if you want to know what the answer is, the answer is absolutely yes.
Wow.
That the way a board interacts with board members, how the board members interact with one another, actually explains 4% of a company's profitability.
Wow.
When it's high quality, then the company outperforms their competitors, and the work that's done in the C-suite contributes 4% to that company's profitability. And when they don't perform well as a team, they actually detract from financial performance. And that's interesting. I think it's interesting, right? But is it enough for me to pay attention if it's only 4%? So I decided that I was going to study executive management teams, the C-suite, the CEO and his direct reports, mainly because board directors are not full-time employees of the company. They don't have their lives and their careers on the line, right?
Yep.
They don't produce anything except ideas and advice for management. So they're not producing reports, they're not producing products. But who is? The C-suite is, right? Their careers are on the line based on how well they perform. Their full-time job, their money comes from that job, whereas a board director, only a little bit of their earnings come from being on a board. And they're really accountable. So after I studied boards, I studied C-suite teams. And what I found is that the quality of the team in the C-suite explains 20% of a firm's profitability.
Wow.
And that's enough to move the needle. That's enough for an investor to say, if I'm going to invest in this company, I want to know whether or not the C-suite team actually performs well as part of my decision making on whether or not I'm going to invest in that company. So, and what I also found was that those organizations that had high dynamic quality, team dynamic quality in the C-suite outperform their competitors on profitability. And the ones that perform poorly as a team underperform the average profitability of their competitors. So it makes a difference. And I had hoped that when I graduated in 2014, that companies and investors would pay attention to this. And here we are 8 years later, and it's just beginning to sink in that human capital, the way people perform in an organization, actually move the needle on how well that company performs. So it's taken 8 years and it still hasn't taken off, but I hope maybe in the next 8 years, it will be a requirement for companies to assess their board directors and their C-suite executives, not for their own individual competencies and capabilities, but how well they are able to function in a team.
Wow. But at least it's moved the needles a little bit and it start the movement already, right? So when we see the result, then I'm sure that organizations start to realize the importance of the cohesion within the executive teams and the board to make sure that they select the right person in, or make sure that they have the right intervention in to help these people to make better relationship. Thanks to you to start that change.
Yeah. And again, it's not about how well, it's not about the competencies or capabilities of the individual. It's how that individual interacts with their peers to generate desired outcomes, to actually be able to leverage each other's strengths and ideas and work effectively together. Looking at, so, a little more detail, I identified 21 attributes of team that I measure to determine whether or not the team is high performing or low performing. And those 21 attributes are actually in 3 big areas. One is the quality of the interaction between the team members. There are 10 attributes. Yeah, the interaction. So there are 10 attributes that I measure there. And some of them are engagement, active listening, relationality, understanding, planning, taking action, openness, power and influence. I think I pretty much named most of them. So some people call it the white space between people. So when you work with somebody and you feel like you're getting along with them and you're on the same page and you're thinking the same way, that's what I'm measuring. So it's something that you can experience, but you don't often know how to put words to it. What I did is I found a way to describe those experiences, those feelings, in how you interact with others. So that team interaction quality is one piece. The second piece is team effectiveness. So the ability of a team to actually produce desired outcomes. Yeah, so effectiveness, team effectiveness. So we might like each other a lot, and get along well. But if we're not able to produce results, who cares?
Yeah.
Right? It's not sustainable, because management is going to say, I'm glad that you guys like each other, but if you're not getting work done, if you're not producing what the team is charged to produce, new products, serving clients, being innovative, producing, whatever outcome, management is going to say, I'm breaking you up. This is not kindergarten. On the other side, even if a team produces their outcomes, if they're not getting along with one another, that's equally not sustainable, because people will not stay on a team where they don't feel like they have a good experience. So I might be able to produce a result with you, but I don't really enjoy my time working with you. We don't get along. We don't see things eye to eye. I'll do my work, and then I'll ask to be assigned to a different team. So that's not sustainable either. So what we need is teams to not only be able to get along with each other on the team, but also to be able to produce results.
Yep.
The third area that I measure has to do with the fundamentals of teams, which looks at things like trust. So that's not an interaction quality. That's not whether or not I'm paying attention to you. That's not whether or not I'm taking action or planning. This is, sort of the fundamental foundation of team, which includes trust, morality, modesty.
Honesty?
Modesty.
Modesty.
Yeah. Things like altruism, team-mindedness. So these are some of the sort of fundamental building blocks of teams that create the context, create the container for that interaction quality and the ability of the team to produce an outcome. So that's what I study. That's where my expertise is in understanding teams. And the reason that I studied this is because in my work as a consultant, I was able to observe hundreds of teams. And after a while, I got good at walking into a room and just observing the team members. And I knew whether or not it was a positive team and a productive team, or the team had problems, was divided in two. And it made a difference on how I consulted to those organizations. And I wanted to be able to understand team without having to personally observe with my eyes. So I created a survey, an instrument, an assessment instrument. And that's what my PhD research is based on, is the participation of board directors and C-suite executives filling out that assessment tool.
Wow, beautiful. What happened after the night what you finished the PhD in 2014, right? What happened after that up until this point?
What happened? I actually don't know. So in 2000 I started my own consulting firm called Charas Consulting. And I still serve clients through Charas Consulting today. So after I finished my PhD, I basically stayed as an independent consultant. But my background was in accounting and finance. And so I always looked at the human capital, at HR, through that lens. So after I graduated from business school, I was a consultant. I worked for the Hay Group. I worked for Ernst & Young, which is now called EY. I did about a year and a half as an internal consultant at GE Capital. I worked at Towers Perrin, which is now called Willis Towers Watson. I worked for Arthur Andersen, which basically went away. And then I did corporate work. So I was the Chief Human Resources Officer for 3 companies, 2 of them in financial services and 1 in advertising. And then after my last Chief Human Resources Officer role, that's when I went back to school to get my PhD. And when I came out of the PhD, I stayed as an independent consultant. I went back into my own company, and I started teaching. So, and today I basically have 4 jobs.
Wow.
I guess. One job is my consulting company. One job is my technology company. So I'll talk about that in a second. One job is working for the conference board. So I have 3 roles at the conference board, and the conference board is it started off in the early 1900s as the economic think tank for the United States.
Oh.
And is a nonprofit organization that is in the business of creating thought leadership in different areas. So economic, human resources, marketing and communications, labor. So there are now lots of centers. And what the company is about is thought leadership. So we do research. Every center has researchers, and I'm a researcher in one of the centers. So I do that, and then I teach at 3 universities.
How do you manage all of that time?
How do I? I don't know. I'm efficient, and I have a lot of, I don't have children, so I have a lot of time where I decide, I'm not taking a kid to soccer or, baseball. I'm not running around taking my kids places. So my time is my own, and I get to decide how I spend my time and where I spend my time. So, and it gives me doing all of these things, although it's a little bit of exhausting. It does give me a lot of psychic income, a lot of intrinsic rewards, knowing that I'm teaching the next generation how to be a good human capital practitioner. So that's the teaching. For the nonprofit, it's creating that thought leadership that's going to make a difference for a human capital practitioner.
Yep.
Right? So that they get some insights and some value that helps them do their job better. And, in my consulting firm, I'm a problem solver naturally. So I love solving problems and finding solutions to complex and difficult problems. So that's my consulting work. And the technology company really was born out of a client saying, I love working with you. We do a project every year where you take all my data and you analyze my data and you help me understand how my human capital is actually supporting my business. And he said to me, I just wish I could go online and find you there. Right? And then I started thinking about it, and for the last 20 some odd years, I have been using the same diagnostic approach with all my clients. I gather human capital data and financial data. I create metrics. I look at how things are correlated, human capital driving financial outcomes. And that's the foundation that I use to consult my clients. It's data-based and evidence-driven. And I realized that I could probably put that in a system and sell it and let clients do the same type of analytic work that I do, right? To gain those insights, right? That lead to action. Action leads to outcomes that we can measure. So that's how my technology company started. It is a human capital data analytics platform where you put in financial data and human capital data, and the platform automatically calculates like 70 metrics. And then you can use those metrics to drag and drop and create dashboards so that you can see with your eyes over time how attrition impacts profitability, or training and development investments impact productivity. The idea was to mix and match financial information and human capital information so that you can get those insights that inform the types of decisions that you're going to make related to people and
Wow.
people programs.
Wow. I think that is the piece of human capital analysis is now a very, very hot topic around the world. And then a lot of companies right now are looking for a platform that leadership teams be able to see and run simulations like that. And run the predictability of the hiring decisions and stuff. So you're really
Yeah.
leading a lot of beautiful things, Dr. Solange. I'm so like admiring for all of that. I want
Thank
to
you.
travel in time with you a little bit here, okay? And
Okay.
but before I travel time with you, I want to talk about one person very special in here. I write a note in here a lot about her. This is your mother, all
Yep.
right? And she always gave you wonderful advices, and you talk about your father. He was an accountant, but you never mentioned what did your mother do. I'm curious to know, what did she do?
So both my parents were born in Eastern Europe.
Mm,
They were teenagers when World War II started,
mm,
and they were refugees. So they left the country after the war with the Nazis, right? The end of World War One.
mm,
I mean, sorry, World War II. And then the communists came, and they left the country when the communists came. But they were refugees. They left under false papers, and they left everything behind.
mm,
And my mom didn't get an education. She didn't go to college. My father went to like a trade school to learn how to be a bookkeeper and an accountant. Um, and that's probably the biggest shame for the world, that my mother didn't get a formal education, because she was really brilliant and
mm,
she was incredibly powerful as well,
mm,
like spiritually. We used to say that my mother bends the universe to her will.
mm. Wow.
She doesn't get bent by the universe. She bends the universe to her will. She makes things happen.
Mm,
And she was incredibly smart and incredibly charismatic, and people loved her and loved to talk to her. Um, and I'm speaking about her in the past tense because she died 13 years ago.
I'm sorry.
And she still has this kind of influence, and not just on me and my sister, but anyone that knew my mother, when we have a conversation, they always bring her up.
Absolutely.
So she may have passed away 13 years ago, but she is still actively in conversations today.
I think that we all have angels in our life, and she is the angel to many many people's life, because the way of her thinking, her encouragement that help people to see beyond what they can possibly do. That is break a lot of boundaries and uncage a lot of things for a lot of people to see and do things that bigger than themselves. And I think that
Yeah,
her past is also set forth for you to start your PhD program also back then, right?
yeah.
Mm.
She always used to say I'd be a really good teacher. And I used to say, I'm not interested in teaching.
Wow.
And it's interesting, I mean, that she saw that I would, and what she said to me was, you would be a good teacher for smart people.
Mm.
Yeah. Which, that's a distinction, right?
Mm.
There are some people who are really good at teaching, people that have difficulties learning, right? And that's a skill and a talent. But she thought I would be a really good teacher for advanced students.
Mm.
And I teach in the master's programs. I don't teach undergraduates. I don't teach grade school. I teach students who are advanced, who want to take their learning farther. And the process to get into a master's program, the scrutiny is a little higher than getting into an undergraduate program. So when I was, in my 20s, she said, you would be a good teacher for smart people.
Ah.
And, look at me now. That's where I ended up. So she had a lot of, she was prescient, right? She could see into the future.
Now you're not only teach, special student, but also being a teacher for a lot of like people in the CIS office, so that they can lead the organization better. So the impact is even higher. And so let's travel time in here. And before we do that, I will say thank you to my mom after this conversation, because every time that I have people remind about the great works of their moms working. My mom also did a very beautiful thing when I was young. Right, we were very very poor, and but she always embedded a seed in my head that one day I'm gonna travel to the US for education, and she tried really really hard to save the money until I went to university and sent me to the States, and and nobody believed her, 30 years ago nobody believed that she gonna spend that money and we're gonna be able to go there, and we did it. And so I will say thank you to her.
Thank God for mothers.
Yep, thank God to mother. Yep. Dr. Solange, let's travel time now. All right. When I was young, I wanted to become an astronaut and and jump in different planet, and life did not give me any chance to doing so. And so you were born in the States, 5 years old. You did not speak any English at all. And so, but then, how when you were young like that, what was your dream about your future, Dr. Solange?
I think when I was a little girl, I wanted to be a doctor.
Be a doctor.
Yeah. And I ended up being a doctor, but just not a medical doctor. I became a doctor, but not the kind of doctor that I thought about when I was a little girl. I think I wanted to be a doctor. And then I actually, when I went to college, my first semester in college, I wanted to give myself some opportunities, right? I wasn't quite sure what I wanted to do. So I took a pre-med biology. This was my first semester. I went to UCLA for my first year of college, and they had quarters. So it was only 10 weeks long, right? It wasn't a full semester.
Yep.
So they had 4 quarters a year instead of 3 semesters. So that the terms are very short. So I took 3 classes: pre-med, engineering, and economics. And I was waiting to see what touched me, what moved me. And I really loved the pre-med. But I didn't get a good grade. And I'm very ambitious and I'm very competitive. And I had achieved 97% of the class in the labs and in the exams, 97%. But because UCLA graded on a curve, 10% of the class did better than I did. And so I ended up getting a B+, and everyone else, the top 10% got A's, A minus. And then it was on a curve. It was forced. And I said, I'm going to work my what off for 8 years and achieve 97% and only get a B+. I'm not doing that. So the next class that I liked a lot was economics. And that's what I ended up pursuing. So my undergraduate degree is in political economy. So it's politics, sociology, and economics all mixed together. And that route took me to business. And my father was an entrepreneur, and he built a business. And I used to go with him to the office on Saturdays because he worked like crazy, just like I do now. Some similarity there. And I used to go with him and, watch him work. And He was he was in the manufacturing sector, and so I always loved walking the factory floor and seeing the machinery and watching the people work. And in my consulting, I focused a lot on manufacturing because I enjoyed it. You know, I enjoyed seeing how things are being made and looking at processes, and just like I learned when I was a little girl going to my father's factory.
Wow.
So that's how I ended up in business. And I never thought I would go into HR. I ended up in HR by accident. I really wanted to go into corporate finance, and that's why my MBA is in accounting and finance, not in HR. And in fact, the only HR class that I took was called Organization Behavior. And it wasn't about organization behavior. It was taught by a guy named, oh God, senior moment, Richard Thaler. And you might not know who he is, but he won a Nobel Prize in behavioral economics.
Wow.
So, and he was my organization behavior professor. So even my HR class, my only HR class in business school, was not even an HR class. It was a behavioral economics class taught by a guy who would eventually win the Nobel Prize on what he was teaching us.
So Richard what?
So his name is Richard Thaler, Thaler.
Thaler.
Yeah, and he was a professor at Cornell University, and he's now at University of Chicago.
So you met him when you were at Cornell. So you studied MBA there, and you met him.
Yeah, and he was one of my professors.
Wow.
So I ended up in HR by pure accident.
How did that happen?
Well, when I graduated in 1988, it was right after the 1987 market crash.
Yep.
And even though I had offers to go into corporate finance, I decided that the banks use the LIFO method of personnel management, that the last people they hire are the first people they fire. And I also had a job offer from a company called the Hay Group. And it was, their salary was higher than the other offers. And I said, oh, everybody likes a consultant, so I'll go and take that consulting job for a year. And then once the banks get rid of the people that they hired the year before and they're ready to rehire people, I'll go back into corporate finance. And I just never left that. And first, I fell in love with consulting. I loved the problem solving part of it, and having to come up with a solution that works, and that it was not very intimate. You know, it was very hands off. It was arm's length transaction that I didn't need to learn the names of all the employees in the company. I didn't need to know their stories. I was there to solve a problem and deliver a solution, and then I could move on to the next thing. And I loved how variable it was. Like there was always something new. And I'm a huge multitasker, if you haven't figured that out yet. And I loved being able to work on multiple projects, on lots of projects at the same time, 5, 6, 7 clients at the same time. That made me very happy. And it was only after I went corporate, where I became the head of HR, that I realized that that is very intimate, that the employees expect you to know who they are and their children's names and their stories and where they come from. And that's great. And I know that HR people need to be personable, but it was not natural for me. So I had to teach myself how to be a corporate citizen. I was much more better suited to a consulting job, a consulting career. And after PhD, I decided to stay as a consultant, because I'm much happier when I'm a client server than when I'm a client.
Wow. And I think that you've been mentored and coached by your mom also, right? So you know what it takes, and then you would go into when you know what it takes for you to do, then you set another bigger goal to become something that better in there also. So I'm sure that's
Yeah.
happened. And Dr. Solan, I want to say congratulations, okay, for a lot of things, that amazing thing that you do, and this congratulation goes into two things. First, um, life always has its way to bring back what you want from the beginning, from when you were young, and when you were young, you want to be a doctor, right? And doctor make treatments to people like you, or me. You are a different kind of doctor, but also deal with the people side. All right, and then
Yep.
you diagnose organization. You had change in the teams. You had to create the environment. That's the same thing. It's a different set of doctor, but it's still, yeah. So that is
Yeah,
congratulations
you're right.
for having
Thank you.
your childhood dream comes true. All right. The second
Thank
one
you.
is I have a lot of friends who are executives and that leading companies around the world. And for some reason, they always come to me and talk when they retire. And I really appreciate that opportunity for them to pick me out of the many people and talk to me a lot. And there's a few things that they regret not doing. One that is not starting their own company when they were younger, because they've been able to make millions for organization. Why not make it for themselves, right? Second is they had a lot of great stories that they want to write a book about, to share their expertise and stories and experience, so that it can be, and transfer the knowledge to the next generations or so, and they're yet doing that. So I always encourage them to do both and say it's never late to run your business now, it's never late to write a book now, so keep doing. And then I become a person push them in the back, and I keep, from time to time, say, Charles, did you do this? Michael, did you run? Did you? What's the progress of the book? For example, like that, right? And you do both. And you had your own company, and you decided not to go back to the corporate and forget about all the comfortability within a corporate life. Now, it's very stable there. And then you
Yep.
having your own company and wandering around the, like the one world, and it's challenging as an entrepreneur. And at the same time, you write you wrote your book, Humanized Human Capital, together with Stella. So I want to say
Yep.
congratulations for that.
Thank you.
Tell us how did you both end to that journey, happen to that journey to write a book together, and what's the book about?
Was the book what?
Yeah, what's the book about?
Oh, what is the book about? Um, okay, let me tell you how we ended up writing the book.
Yes,
Stella is a futurist in human resources, human capital. She thinks about the future. She thinks about how companies need to redesign work so that they are prepared for the future, so that they can survive. So she's thinking ahead. She's always dreaming about the future. I'm a data analyst. I'm a data wonk. I love data. I love telling stories with data. I love understanding what data tells us, so that it's not our opinion, it's actually fact. It's the interpretation of facts instead of making up stories, which I call superstition. And Stella and I were introduced by a mutual acquaintance who I had known since the late 80s, and Stella had not known as long. I think Stella knew him like 3 or 4 years, and I knew him for 20 years. And we had lunch one day, and he said, I have somebody that I want to introduce you to. And that was Stella. So in our first conversation, we were finishing each other's sentences. That's how in sync we were, how aligned we were. And I don't know how long it was, maybe a year after we met, I wrote to her and I said, I think we should write a book.
Wow.
And she wrote back to me, we were texting, And she wrote back to me and she said, about what? And I said, about the intersection of our passions. Because there are a lot of books out there about the future of work, and there are a lot of books out there about data analytics, but there isn't a book that combines the two so that you can use data analytics to understand the signals in your own company and then use that information to plan a course to meet the future. They're different topics, and I think they should be collapsed. They should be one topic. So, I said, let's write a book. I'm texting her, let's write a book. She writes back, about what? I said, about the intersection of our passions. She wrote back, okay. So, one of the things that you were saying earlier on is about power and how you bring things into your life. Like my mom would bend the universe to her will. About a week later, somebody sent me an email saying, I represent a publishing company in Europe and they're looking for book ideas and writers. That was like not even a week. So I forwarded to Stella and I said, you see what we created? We created an invitation to submit a book proposal to a publisher. So she said, okay, you convinced me. So we put ourselves in a room for about 3 hours, and we actually created the structure of the book, what the chapters would look like. That's how fast, that's how in sync we were, and how complementary our competencies, our experiences, our viewpoints, they just complement one another. And we wrote this proposal, and that company basically said, no, thank you. So we said, okay, no problem. And then somebody else showed up in our lives from a different publisher from the United States. And he said, I'm really interested in your idea. So, because I don't know how he found out about it, but he came to us and he said, I think it was through somebody else who told him about us and the book. And so that opportunity came to us, and that didn't work out. And then the third time was the charm. The third time we had a book agent, a literary agent, actually represent us. And we had 3 publishers want to publish the book. So that's how it happened. It happened with an innocent text. And it took about 4 years, 3 years or so, to get from that first text to the book being published. But we made it happen, and the book is really, for me, it's really interesting. It does something that is very different that I have not read in a book yet. And, when I did my PhD research, I read something like 3,000 books and articles in a 3.5-year period of time. I've read basically everything when it comes to governance and human capital. And there was a gap. There was something that was missing. So the first thing that the book accomplishes is that marriage between data analytics, data-driven, evidence-based approaches to designing and responding to the future of work. So that's the first thing, is this intersection between these 2 ideas. The other thing that we did is we turned human resources on its side. Instead of writing the book through the viewpoint of management, we wrote the book through the viewpoint of the worker. What does it take to support a worker through that employee life cycle? Because what we believe is that the next evolution of the business model is an employee-centric business model. That means that companies see the employee as the limiting resource, and they build the capabilities and competencies of the company around that limited resource. So if employees are going to be the most important thing, which CEOs have been saying now for years, employees are our most important asset, well, now it's time to live that. Yeah. So if you're going to run your company as an employee-centric organization, you have to see the world through the employee. And that's what we did. We wrote the book through the viewpoint, through the perspective of the employee. What do companies need to do to address those needs? And the third thing we did was we identified these principles. So if you follow the principles in the way that you run human resources, we identified 20 principles, you won't have a problem designing and managing an employee-centric business model. So, and the other thing that we did is we made it really readable. So people are saying that it's really easy to. I had dinner with friends on Friday night. Neither of them. It's a married couple. Neither of them are HR people. One, the wife is an entrepreneur. The husband has an MBA from Wharton, and he's a financial whiz. So he doesn't manage people. And they both said that the book is like so readable. Like they can really relate to the stories, the vignettes, the way the book is structured. And that's what we wanted. We wanted something that people could actually read and not have to work. You know, it's like sometimes I read a book and it's like so much work. And other times I read a business book and it just flows. It just makes sense. And that's what we wanted. We wanted a book that was really, really readable.
Wow.
And apparently it's very listenable to as well, because it's in an audio version, and people on LinkedIn are writing me saying, I got the audio version and it's great. It's really easy to listen to. So, so that's how the genesis of the book and what the book's about.
See, that's a beautiful how like-minded people when they join together and they create amazing things, right? And the universe has its way to make it happen for the two of you also to really bring the love of the works that you love to do onto something that can be transferable to the people that they can apply and really make change at an organization. And like you say, I believe that this is the era for employee experience, and for a very long time working, I'm struggle with the fundamental conflict in management when organizations always say that employees are great resources, but the treatment to the employees doesn't seem like so, and
Right.
and like the pandemic is one of the catalysts. I think that makes a lot of positive change out of the worst thing of that happened, but there's a lot of positive change for the employees, for the manager, for the leaders to see their real role in life and what they need to be doing to make a better place for everybody, right?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And the world is changing, and the relationship between people and their work is changing.
Yep.
So I'm a baby boomer, and I'm also an immigrant. And well, I'm not an immigrant because I was born in this country, but I grew up in a household that was an immigrant household. And it was all about work. Yeah. You went to work and you did your job. And then when you finished your job, then you had your life.
Yep.
Yeah, they were separate. My mom, when she came to this country, I'm going to tell you another mom story. When my mom came to this country, she was a sales lady. That's what, my father went to work, being an entrepreneur. My mother was a sales lady. And I was a sales lady at some point before I went to business school. I actually had a sales job at Neiman Marcus, which is an upscale store in the United States. And my mother used to say, your customers don't care if you're having a good day or a bad day. They don't care. They're there to get service, and service with a smile. So even if your heart is breaking, you put a smile on your face, and that's your outside. What's going on in the inside is the inside. What's going on in the outside is what people are going to see. And nobody cares whether or not you're having a good or a bad day. Yeah. And that's what work was. Work was nobody cares whether or not you're having a good or bad day. You show up and you do your job. But this generation is different.
Yep.
It's not like that. We don't separate. It used to be called work-life balance, but it's not work-life balance. It's work-life integration.
Yep.
It's how are we able to integrate our work and our life so that we have, a fuller, richer experience of both. When I grew up, they were separate. Yep. Now we have to figure out how to integrate them. So the world is changing. The contract between the employee and the employer is changing. And as organizations, we need to be more aware of that. We can't just simply say, oh, I'm going to fire that person because they're not doing a good job and I can find somebody else to replace them. The problem is you can't find somebody else to replace them.
Yep.
The labor force is shrinking, and the millennials and the Gen Zs want to be independent.
Yep.
And so they want more gig work. They want to be able to call the shots. They want to be able to design their lives. And companies that don't understand that are not going to make it.
Absolutely. Dr. Solange, you say your parents were from Eastern Europe. What country were they from?
They're from Romania.
Romania. Have you been back to Romania ever since?
I've been to Romania once to see where my mom grew up.
It's a beautiful country, isn't it?
There are some beautiful things in the country, yeah, and the food is really good.
One of my best friends, he went to Romania for school, and then by the time that I am back from the States back to Vietnam, I also called him to come back, and then we built our I got a chance to join a group called Deco, so. And I got a chance to build the group from scratch in this part of the world. So he always told me about Romania and Romanian and how beautiful that country is. So my wife and I just talked about it a few days ago. Say next year we're gonna travel to Eastern Europe because normally we would travel to different part of the Europe, but not the eastern side. So we are excited for the chance to go there in summer of next year.
Yeah. You should definitely go and see Prague, because it's a beautiful city, and it never got ruined during World War II. No bombs, because Hitler's girlfriend liked Prague, so he ordered that Prague should not be bombed. So Prague is beautiful. You should go there, and you should go to Romania to see the countryside. It's beautiful.
Absolutely.
And the thing that Stella and I have in common is my grandmother, my mother's mother, was born in the same town that Stella was born in.
Where is it?
So she was born in Moldova.
Oh, Moldova, yeah.
And my grandmother came from Moldova. In the same town.
So your mom's
that Stella
mother?
Was born. My mother's mother. Went from Moldova to Romania. And she married her husband and started her family, and then everybody left after the war. There wasn't nobody stayed in Romania after the war. So, but that's what she and I have in common is that Moldova
thing.
Yep.
Dr. Solange, I have two last questions for you for tonight. Okay,
yeah.
I know it's late for you already. And the first question is about thinking. Because my wife and I, we are in the quest to help people to improve their ability to think. And we believe that our thinking capability is diminishing, not increasing. So if we can talk to experts like you are, you've been working a lot on thinking, your work involves a lot about thinking, and you also meet a lot of people who think deeply, critically, and big. So we asked you this question, all right? Dr. Solange, how have you been helping yourself to expand your ability to think?
That's a really interesting question. So I think there's something organic, there's something innate about the ability to think. And there's also something learned. Yeah. So I think that thinking is fundamentally a product of curiosity. Yeah. So, like, I had a friend who used to take apart everything, toys. Like when he was a little kid, his parents would give him a toy and he would take it apart,
Ah.
right? And the parents would be upset because he's ruining the toy. But what he was doing is he was taking apart the toy to see how it worked.
Ah.
And he ended up becoming an engineer, right? So I think that there's something innate that drives us to think a certain way, that's fueled by curiosity. So I think what helps me is this sense of curiosity. And, I'm not going to miss an opportunity to say data analytics, to say data, because that's where I come from. I'll share with you that we are now having an election in the United States.
Yep.
And there's a lot of tension between the Republicans and the Democrats. And the Republicans want you to think a certain way. They want you to be afraid. They want to fund the police. They want stronger laws against crime, right? We played this game like in the mid 80s, and this concept on focusing on crimes and criminals did not help this country. It actually hurt this country. But that's the message. The message is crime, inflation, right? And civil liberties. Those are the three themes. And the Republicans are saying, tough on crime, no bail, right? But if you look at the data, the communities where they had bail reform actually had better outcomes because we released people so that they could fix their lives, so that they could pay their debt to society, instead of being locked up in jail until your trial, where you just get more in debt, right? And your family, you can't go back to your job, your family suffer, and when families suffer, communities suffer. And so the Republicans want you to think that you should be tough on crime, but being tough on crime actually is deleterious. It hurts communities. And they're telling you a story without showing you the data. And if you actually look at the data, it's the other way. You should be less tough on bail. You should let people go back to work. I'm not saying if somebody, shoots somebody, right? Somebody kills somebody. I'm not talking about that kind of a violent crime. I'm talking about, civil crime, not bodily crime, not when you're killing somebody.
Yep.
But if somebody steals something from somebody else, right? They put them in jail until their trial. And the trial can be a year. So you're destroying somebody's life and the people that depend on them. And then it goes downhill. So it's a long way to say, get data. Yeah? Get data. Don't let somebody else influence your opinion by trusting them. Do your own research and get the data. And I'll give you another momism. My mother used to say, if you can't decide, if you can't make up your mind about something, it's because you simply don't have enough information.
Wow.
So if you are uncertain about what you should do, if you can't decide, should I do this or should I do that, it's because you simply don't have enough information. So go out and get more information. And the minute you have enough information, the answer will become very clear to you.
Wow. So have more data, have enough data so that you can have the decision by yourself, right? Not get led influenced by somebody else. Then fuels your thinking with curiosity so that you can have more perspective. And I wrote here there's a tool that I wrote in here.
I think that's Pretty good.
Pretty good. Pretty
I never,
good.
I never thought of that, but I think, people need to be curious, because if you're not curious, then you don't explore.
Yep.
And I'm not talking about exploring, like you were saying, going to Europe and, right? Exploring how things are connected, why things happen. So even though I didn't study HR, I actually am a behavioralist. So my PhD research was in the behavioralist school. I'm interested in studying how people behave and what the outcomes are of those behaviors. And, you need to be curious. And if you're not curious about something, that's okay. Be curious about something else.
Yep.
But it's the curiosity that's going to fuel your exploration of that topic.
Yep.
But just make sure you get data.
Yeah.
Yeah. Reagan said, trust but verify.
Trust but
Right?
verify. Yep.
If you're in a conversation with somebody and they tell you something, trust them, but verify the data.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That
Go and
part
do your
of
own
that
research.
part of verification is a lot of people miss doing that. So because
That's right.
you and I are too close, and then I trust you with wholeheartedly, but then actually it blinded myself because I'm not verified information, and that make me sometimes got into the trap of like thought that is unnecessarily. So thanks for sharing that. Trust but verify. Last question, Dr. Solange. And so we knew you were born in the States, and then up until 5 years old, you did not speak English at all. And that's good for you, because by 20 years old, I did not speak any English also myself until I was sent to the States. Right? So at least you have a childhood that you speak different language in the country where everybody speak English. Most like it, put it that way. All right. So it's good in a sense. And so you love to become a doctor, and then life gave you different path. You now come back to, what the doctor dream. The dream being a doctor. Now you did different kind of doctor. So Dr. Solange, all right. We want to know a little bit about the future. So is there anything that Dr. Solange is working on that you are exciting and you want to share with the audience and myself, so that we can celebrate with you in advance?
Yes, I'm working on my retirement.
It's too early. No.
It's not too early. I'm almost there. What I'd like is for the things that I've invested in, the software company, my team assessment, I'd like to see them mature and get some traction. And I really would like to retire. And I see my retirement as doing two things: teaching and doing board service. I've been on public company boards. I want to go back on a public company board and really just in my retirement do board service and do higher education teaching. And that's how I want to make my contribution. And I want to travel. Yep. So, you asked me whether or not I've been to Vietnam. I want to travel. I want to spend at least, 1 to 2 weeks a month traveling.
Absolutely.
So that's my goal, and that's where I hope to see myself in the next 5 years. Is really just focusing, instead of having so many jobs and doing so many things, really just focusing on teaching and board service, not doing technology, not doing consulting, not. I'll probably always do research. I'm working on 3 research projects right now, like primary research projects. But really focus my attention more on, higher impact. I love the teaching, and I know that makes a difference in the lives of my students and in the professionalization of the human capital function, because I'm teaching them stuff that they wouldn't get anywhere else.
Mm.
Yeah, teaching them data and analytics and financial literacy and, you know, technical things that they need to know to be successful in the future. And I want to do board service because that's what my PhD is in, and I want to be able to use my PhD. So, so that's the future, and then a lot of traveling, and a lot of doing my hobbies. So
absolutely, absolutely. Enjoy that, if you, and you deserve it also, Dr. Solange. So travel more, enjoy more, see the world,
yep.
And I would love to see you in person one day, so we can give you a big hug and we can have some coffee together. All right?
I'd like that. I like that. So come to New York, because you're likely to come to New York before I'm likely to go to Vietnam. So
probably. Yeah.
I will see you when you come. When you come to visit your daughter.
Absolutely, absolutely.
And you come to New York, let me know, and maybe we get together with Stella.
Absolutely, I look forward to that.
The three of us get together.
And my wife too,
yeah?
because you're gonna travel with me
together.
together.
And your wife, of course. The four of us get together.
The four of us getting together, all right? So, Dr. Solange, thanks a lot for the wonderful opportunity to meet you in today in our Inside Sharing Show, and having you to share your amazing journey with our audience. There's a lot of advices. There's a lot of lessons we learn from here. There's a lot of things that we can celebrate in here, and I want to say thank you for spending time with us. I really love it.
My pleasure. My pleasure. I hope that this will resonate with somebody, and they'll go, "Oh yeah, I get that. I like that too. Maybe I should follow that path." So hopefully somebody will get some benefit from this.
Absolutely, absolutely. Dr. Solange, have a wonderful evening, and let's meet in person one day soon.
Absolutely. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye for now.
Bye.
Bye.